Tom is gonna be.
Say, well, what does it mean if you take things that we think are all hierarchical in a building, for instance, and flatten them out on a plane?
Oh yes, this is actually directly coming from my employee who are fan of you, 서현식 팀장.
My mom actually grew up in Korea.
Really?
Yeah, I went to high school there and stuff.
You
Yeah.
went to high school there?
Yeah.
What?
So, yeah.
Hi channel, this is Wonjali from Architecture Recipe. Today we have Los Angeles and very specific place, and I'm with Tom Wiscombe. Thank you for being here with us,
My
Tom.
pleasure.
Yeah. So before we start, I'm gonna introduce about Tom Wiscombe a little bit. So Tom Wiscombe here, talented architect, and he has been shaping architecture scene in Los Angeles with extensive experience at the SCI-Arc and UCLA and UPenn and Yale. And beyond his express career, Tom is known for pioneering the concept of the flat ontology, the theory that continues to inspire and influence young architects and architecture students around the world. Is that true?
I don't know if that's true. I mean, I think that's great. It's great to hear that. The idea of the flat ontology is just something that I fell into through reading philosophy. I'm a big reader of philosophy. I have been since I was an undergrad. Well, there are lots of different philosophers that talk about the flat ontology now, from Manuel de Landa, who's an architect philosopher, natural philosopher. There's Timothy Morton. There are many, Bruno Latour. So a lot of different philosophers talk about it in different ways. But if I just think about what is it basically, it's a kind of democratic idea about all the things in the world being equal but different. So if you look at the room that we're in right now, there's a microphone and a keyboard and a person and a model and a television screen and all of that. If you just imagine all of those things kind of on a flat plane, instead of always in hierarchical conditions, they can interact in a completely different way than we normally assume. So all I did is think about this sort of democratic idea in terms of architecture. And that's kind of my contribution, I guess. And I started to say, well, what does it mean if you take things that we think are all hierarchical in a building, for instance, and flatten them out on a plane? So you take, for instance, the facade of a building, the decoration of a building on top of the facade. You separate them. So it's the first move for me was to separate architectural elements. Everything just sort of separated out and look at it independently and then put it back together. And that created a new kind of diversity in the work that we were doing. I don't know if you ever saw, I worked on tattoos for a while on buildings. And so the idea was that the ornamentation or the tattoos were totally independent from what the facade was doing. So they could be doing this and the facade would be doing this, and you put them together and things would be juxtaposed, and sort of the sum of those two things would be more exciting and better than just everything connected and fused together. So I talk a lot about separation of objects and joints between objects, because I think that separation really helps you create things with their own life. And then when you put them back together, it's an amazing kind of new way of composing things together.
I think I was going to talk about the project later on, but then when I see your project, for example, the Korean Letter Museum or the new signage project in Los Angeles, that one, and then the housing project there's like not many things that you can thinking about as a context in the neighborhood. When I see that the Korean Letter Museum, the way that you approach the museum is not, not only you're not try to respect too much, but also you create different urban fabric or context itself, so that it creates as a machine. Is it how you feel, or do you have other thought into it?
In that project, we were literally working with the idea of parts assembling together in a new way and trying to really working between something that appears to be a whole, but is constituted out of parts. But part to whole logic is something a lot of architects have an idea about. Sometimes it moves more towards fusing things together. So you say there are parts and there's a whole. The whole is better than the parts, all of this stuff that you hear. But I always like to say that I want to read the individual parts in the final piece. So I will spend on this project that I'm just holding a little model of, it's, this is called Earth Protector. And, it's made out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 slabs leaning on each other, like a house of cards. And the key in all the way that we detail it and the way that we work on it is to make sure that things look sort of connected and make a new thing, but it almost looks like it could fall back apart, or you could pull it back into its parts. And so that was a similar idea with the Museum of World Writing, which I believe was in Incheon. And so the parts that we developed for that project, it's was so important to us to have these joints between these parts and the main body of the building. So yeah, so that's like really key. And the parts didn't come really at all from the context. They came from, I was looking at this is gonna be funny, I was looking at medieval castles at the time. And I was really excited about castles. Castle also has some of those qualities, you know, like a turret, and even the way that it hits the ground, it has, you know, battered walls, and there's just all of these really clear components in castles. So a lot of those pieces came from doing 3D print studies and massing studies using parts of castles. And so I guess what we were trying to do, it's coming back to me now, I'm remembering the project. We were trying to create a low flat building that was related to the context, which was a huge park, and then these higher elements that poked up that were relating to the tall buildings nearby. So it is loosely related, but it's not at all mimicking what's around it.
So since you were talking about that element where I think we can talking about the facade, the way that you actually looking into the facade, because you mentioned about the tattoo before, and the concept of tattoo that you looking at in architecture, I guess maybe that might be the like unusual like concept for architecture student maybe, because we have a lot of architecture students that they're curious about your project, but then they just, I've seen a lot of students actually just mimicking what you're doing in it without, like, I don't know, knowing actual concept. Can you talk about a little bit about that? Can you give us a little insight?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the idea for tattoos was that I think at that time, I'm trying to remember exactly when we started, but I think it was about at the time of, remember when Grasshopper came out in 2007? From Rhino as a plugin. That if you remember, like there were just, everyone was doing gradients, Grasshopper gradients, and it was just like the whole culture was about that. And this is like the new look for our century, you know, and all that. And I was looking at it going like, yeah, but one thing I don't like about that is you can see how it was made. You can see what tool was used. You know how it was made. And that to me like takes away the whole mystery and intrigue of architecture, of looking at something and not knowing. And one thing I like is what scale it's at. I like to play with scale and like who made it, what tool did they use. I want to keep all of that suspended. Don't want to communicate that. But when you look at a gradient, you're like, I know exactly what tool, I know what guy did it. And so I was thinking, what's the exact opposite of that? And I said, well, maybe it's a tattoo that just gets applied and maybe even misaligned onto a form. That's the exact opposite of that. And I found that we started studying it and it just got more and more interesting. I'm like, wait a minute, what is this? So that was even before I started talking about a flat ontology. I started doing this already, yeah. So the tattoos being in opposition to the form of the facade, we were already working on that. And then I started to think about it more and I'm like, oh, this isn't just about facades, it's about the circulation, the structure of the interiors, all the ground, everything being sort of objectified and separated. And that's how I kind of came onto that idea.
I mean, for like adding to my personal story, it took me about like 10 years to figure out how you did it on that tattoo. Because back in my undergrad, like the first time I saw your project was like fascinated, and then like I've been into the grasshopper because it seems like you use grasshopper to like in my eyes. But then later on, you keep changing with some freedom that I can't really figure out at the moment. So I was asking my friends and asking friends of friends who work for you or, you know, Ease, and like no one knows
Top
it.
secret.
Yeah. And then like maybe a couple of years ago, someone told me that who actually did the work with you. I think it was a youth and student. And he told me that finally, actually that was a script and what was that? The displacement, whatever, map.
Yeah, well, there are lots of different steps.
It's a different thing. So I was like, man, it took me like so many years. I should have started with Maya or different things.
Yeah.
And like,
well, we were trying all the different tools and different ways for doing it. In fact, you know, I've really built my practice around Rhino now. It's really an important software for us. It's also very flexible, lots of plugins, all that stuff. But at that time, we were mostly working in Maya, which is, of course, you know, related to the film industry and character, you know, design and all of that. And that we use that with ZBrush, which helped us do the tattoos and all of these things. But the reason why, and I guess what I would say is, to this day, we use a lot of different tools, maybe even badly, like not how they're intended, because we're always focused on what we want out of them. It's not what is the tool going to give me for free? It's what do we want, and what tools are going to help that.
I love that.
Yeah, so I really have always been focused on that thing. You know, I think the combination of great people, you know, creative people, and solid ideas and intellectual framework, I think you have to have both of those.
So I just want to let you know that there are a lot of students who actually try to follow you, and they're in the trouble to using what software you're using it.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that. I think that's great.
Yeah, this is the way that they respect you. So
Yeah, thank you. And I do think it's a really good way to educate young people, to have them copy other people, you know, because when you copy something, you never do it very accurately, and you make discoveries along the way. And eventually, if you keep working on something, let's say you started by copying something, if you keep working on it, it won't be like the original anymore. It'll be yours. And I think that's just such a good way to think about architecture in general. I mean, you know, I look at other architects' architecture all the time. I'm not sitting here just in my own world making stuff from nothing. You don't make anything from nothing. You always make something from something else. So I look at Paul Rudolph, for instance. I'm a huge fan of Paul Rudolph. You know, the brutalist, he's just amazing, you know?
So you've been working for him like many years, and were you in the Venice? What was it? The Kupimablos office?
Yes, I worked with Wolf Prix for like 10 years or more.
You were the director of the designer.
Yes, I was like Wolf's right hand for many years, and Wolf is an amazing guy.
He's my favorite architect.
He's very good. He's very good. He's also just, you know, he's one of those guys. He's like a master builder type. You know, he wants to talk about facades, structure, program, urbanism. He's really good at business development. He's just an all-around kind of guy like that, and that's really how I also want to be. That's the kind of person the kind of people I want to work with, the kind of people I want to partner with, and the kind of person I want to be. You know, it was awesome to meet him and do that.
When I studied about shoes, and there was a very interesting point that you like practicing the Kupimabla back in the days. I think the other thing that I was surprised was that I can get a sense of it, but I can't really totally directly associate with Kupimabla with you, so which is a good thing, I think, because you totally develop your own language.
That's right. But you know, when I was working with him though, like I owned those projects. You know, like I did BMW World with him and other ones.
You did the BMW?
Yes. And so like, and I owned that, and I really, you know, I think I had a lot of influence on it as well. And so that's also my work. It's his work at the end of the day, but it's also my work.
That was awesome project. Yeah, I've been there like 5 years ago.
Well, it was an awesome client, I have to say. They're you know, BMW is a design company. They understand design. They know its value. So it was amazing working with them.
Oh yes, this is actually directly coming from my employee who are fan of you, 서현식 팀장. He asked me that before you work on or playing with the Godzilla Pro model, and those little tiny objects, very specific object you put on the website, that might be the influence a little bit to you, he think. And do you have any other object you're looking into in these days?
I think it kind of goes without saying for anybody who knows my work that I'm definitely a 70s kid. So there's a lot of things that happened in the 70s that were really influential for me, and there's even some form language and aesthetic kind of sensibility that you get from the 70s. So kind of like chunky and sometimes like low res or even like low quality. You know, I did watch, it was called Monster Mash on Saturdays in the afternoon. I would watch Godzilla and all that stuff. And when I was a kid, then there was a lot of science fiction going on in the 70s. That sort of a lot of dark sci-fi, you know, like Logan's Run and Planet of the Apes and, you know, Escape from New York. All of those, that whole genre of stuff in a strange time, like right sort of after the free love, free speech, kind of late 60s, early 70s thing, golden age of the 70s, which was about a kind of what's the future going to look like now. And there was a lot of, you know, cinema was changing fast, so that was really influential. Even like the toys from the 70s, there was just a lot of stuff that I still carry with me. And Godzilla is just one of those things. Yeah, and the reason I'm still talking about Godzilla is, well, actually there's a bunch of reasons. I don't know why it keeps popping up in my life, but like the one thing is that Godzilla, you know, is part of that group of kaiju who were like, you know, massive monster creatures that are called the Earth Defenders, and this thing is called Earth Protector. And so it's a similar idea, and the Earth Defender creatures are creatures that don't necessarily love humans, but they try to save the Earth from bad monsters. So they're torn. They're like, you know, so they'll step on a human city and destroy it, but they are ultimately trying to save the Earth. I think that's a really interesting idea. It's just really interesting. It's like, but he's torn on humans. He's like, I don't really into humans. You're like, but the Earth, now I'm going to protect that. So I don't know, I just think it's a cool idea. But then the other thing about Godzilla, just randomly, we started to look at, also from the 70s, at those amazing cutaway and peel away drawings that a lot of illustrators were doing at that time, cutting away like the skin of Godzilla to look at his inner guts, or even cutting away his head to see the brain of Godzilla. There was a lot of that stuff going on, and that's really influenced a lot of our drawings now that we do. We'll do a lot of opening things up or chopping the top off or doing a peel away where we pull away areas of skin to show interiors and things.
Next question. So in these days, a lot of architects or non-architects into the AI technology. A lot of people like test with the Mid-Journeys or LoRa's and all the comfy or like Flux AI tools, and people have different opinion about everything or about the AI. Have you used it, or what are your thoughts into it?
I love it. I absolutely love it. I wouldn't say that we're using it yet for actual production of design work. What we do is we'll do some text to image, we'll do some things like that when we're doing an open search, usually looking for atmosphere and color and light. That helps us a lot with production of images like renders and things, just getting other ideas. And then recently we're doing some image to animation AI, where it just takes an image and then creates a moving camera around it, and it's just absolutely incredible. I mean, it's incredible what can be done. I was just on a phone call yesterday where we have a tech client, and he was on there watching me present the project. We showed a render on the screen on Zoom. He screenshotted the image, he threw it into his most recent software, and he showed us within 15 seconds an animation of that image. People walking, camera moving, 15 seconds. I was totally blown away. I was just like speechless. Like just to think about it, that there's this intelligence that looks at your image and it doesn't just see it as pixels, it sees the content. That's what's so shocking to me. It sees that's a person. And I know that a person walks, and a person walks in a certain way, and it knows that they're gonna keep walking forward if they're pointing this way. Like it's that intelligence, it's scary a little bit, that there's an intelligence that looks at our image and images now and knows what it's seeing, and then can build on it. It's just amazing. So I'm super interested in this. I think it's gonna make a huge difference for the way that we represent our work. For some people that are gonna try to use it generatively and try to make designs, I don't really wanna do that, but I'll use it as an additional weapon in the arsenal, I guess, to just opening up creative ideas, look and feel, lighting, all the stuff. That's really helpful to me.
What about since we're talking of the AI, like Elon Musk just recently did a showcase with the robot taxi things and all the technology that as an architect you need to follow. What do you think about those how we need to react as architect for those technology?
Okay, here was my first thought. I'll get around to what you're asking me, but my first thought is, I follow Elon Musk. I think he's a very, very interesting person. He's like the inventor of our time, like the kind of Thomas Edison of our time. Yeah. And what's amazing about him, it goes without saying in a way, is that he's able to move between radically different disciplines and expertises and be successful in multiple different areas, whether it's solar or vehicles or SpaceX or robots, or he's doing sort of all of it. He just sort of touches it and it goes. And I think what my first thought was like, why aren't architects more like that? More entrepreneurial, more willing to change the industries that they work in, more willing to for us, develop software that we need rather than just use the software that's available, or develop new ways of building buildings using prefabricated elements rather than just saying, well, this is what industry can do. I'm fine with that. So I always want architects to be more like that, more aggressive in their posture, more entrepreneurial, more making the industries that they want to have to support their practice and to support architecture. We are so often just passive. We're so often passive. So I just like his attitude, and love or hate his politics, whatever. I don't know. I don't want to talk about that really, but he's just a great, I think a great symbol of not following the rules, doing what he wants, making sure he's the creating innovation in all of these different spheres.
So maybe in Korea, there are a lot of architecture students try to use AI. I guess school in the state, they use AI skill or rendering to a lot. Do you have any opinion about, or should we use more as an architecture student? Because for our subscriber, there are a lot of architecture students.
Yeah, sure. I think everyone should use it. I think it's amazing. I think it's really good to see what the different opportunities are and different kinds of AI software, but it's only going to be as good as you are as a creative individual. So I think developing your aesthetic sensibility, things you like, things that define who you are. When you put that kind of information into AI, it's going to give you back much better results. It will give you stuff, but it will look like stuff you've seen before. And you see that out there. You see a lot of things like, it's producing things, but think about it. Its repository of knowledge and data is the world as it exists today. So if you want to do something new and you're asking a repository that doesn't know about the new, it only knows what exists, it's just going to give you, some kind of rearrangement or hybrid of stuff that we know. So what you need to do is bring originality and authenticity to the tool, and then I think you're going to have really good results.
This is a different question. Recently, or these days, there are a lot of competition happening in Korea, and a lot of architects and architects looking into the Korean industry. Have you considered joining it? But my main question will be, what are you thinking about Korean market as an architect?
I think I'm just not that familiar with it right now. I'd be very interested in working there. My mom actually grew up in Korea.
Really?
Yeah, I went to high school there and stuff. Yeah.
You went to high school there?
Yeah.
What?
So, yeah. So I don't know. I have a connection there in Seoul. So I don't know. I mean, I would love to work there. And
these days, a lot of star architects, for example, Richard Myers, Dominic Perro, Hedwig just recently won on the competition of the island thing over VIZ, and MVRDB, Snow Heras, everyone's really into the competition of Korea. A lot of open competition. So I was just curious about your opinion about it.
Well, I don't know. We should do something there.
Yeah, maybe. I'll talk about it later.
It sounds great. I would love to know what's going on and how everyone is thinking about development in Korea in general. I think it's the time now where it shouldn't. I always think there shouldn't just be random projects going on all the time. That there should be some kind of leadership, and every country is going to do it differently. But some kind of leadership of what's the vision here? What do we want our country to look like? What is the role of technology in our society? Just all of those things. I think it's really important to have that kind of leadership up here before you just start doing a bunch of projects everywhere. So I hope there's that kind of leadership there. We're often missing that here in the States, that kind of leadership too. What kind of world do we want to have? And we look a lot to our political officials, and we have an election coming up to tell us what that is.
Exciting for that.
But I'm not, we don't know what's going to happen. But I think that's not enough. I think, for architecture, there are issues of culture and the arts and technology and sustainability, and there's a lot of things that are specific to architecture and urbanism that I think need to be discussed in a public sphere.
The last question will be not fun, but this is very conventional or routine question. I'm gonna ask you, what's the definition of the modern architecture?
That's so interesting. Yeah, you're right. It does. We need to talk about what that means because people throw that word around a lot. So the way I think of it, because I'm a student of history, I think of when it was sort of invented, the term. So let's say back in the 20s when you have Le Corbusier and then Philip Johnson writing about it with Le Corbusier and talking about a whole seismic shift in architecture from the 19th century and bearing walls and small windows and all of the kinds of the ways of building a building in the 19th century, how that so radically shifted in the 20th century. So we talk about modernism now based on all sort of these boxy buildings we see all over the place, but really at the beginning it was the avant-garde. It was totally exciting, changing everything, blowing up the construction industry, everything was new and everything looked amazing. We look at early Le Corbusier, like the Villa Savoie, and now because we all know it and we learned about it in school, whatever you see, and you're like, oh, okay, I've seen other houses like that. At that time, there was nothing like that. So I love the photograph, I don't know if you've seen it, where it shows the Villa Savoie looking very cool and futuristic, and then there's a little Model T parked in front because that was the car of the time of the house. And the car looks ancient compared to the building. The building looks like a new future that no one's ever seen before. So I just think if we talk about modernism, we should think about the early days of modernism when it first brought a whole new idea about architecture and about what the world could look like to us, and not what's happened since, like in the 70s and the 80s, and sort of big block buildings with terrible daylighting inside and all this sort of bad back end of it. I don't think that's very positive, but I think that initial movement was great, and I think there's no reason why we shouldn't be thinking the same way now. We should be really pushing the envelope, thinking about new building materials, new ways of building buildings. I'm very interested in building buildings with huge chunks. Sustainability, dealing with the issues around that. I'm working on another project right now that has, inclined elevators. This one in my hand, this has inclined elevators, and we're building them, and other things that are just going to change everything. And so I think looking back at the wrong part of modernism is a problem. So,
I agree. I totally agree. Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. Can you advise for the young architect or architecture student that what they should be or what they have to prepare?
I would say that the most important thing is to develop your aesthetic sensibility. Aesthetic sometimes has a bad name. Everyone's like, no, it's function over form or whatever. Don't listen to them. I would say the most important thing is your aesthetic sensibility. What should the world look like? And a good way to do that, I've found in my life, is to start a kind of visual diary. So like, on your desktop, on your computer, I guess everyone just works on their phones now, but start a folder. It's very simple, just a folder of stuff you love, and just put images in there. You can be screenshotting them out of Instagram, wherever they come from, just visual material. And when you go back and look at that, you can even start to categorize it into subfolders of like kinds of things that you like. What happens is it looks back at you and you start to understand who you are as a creative person, as a visual person, and it just kind of, it tells you, it gives you direction. Rather than, because we're all like, and I know especially students are just being bombarded by images and things and constant, especially on social media, it's overwhelming and it all starts to look the same, but it's not all the same. So I think especially now it's important that everybody starts these collections and starts to kind of define who they are, what they like, because if you don't know that, you don't have anything really. Mobility will change, technology will change, everything will keep changing, but it's how you approach those issues through aesthetics is the key for architects. So don't let anybody tell you that, you just have to, everything just needs to be functional and we're just, fulfilling the brief of the owner or those kinds of things. Yes, we do that, but that is low bar. That's way low bar. We've got to bring it to the next level. And really one of our main jobs is to tell the world what we think the future and what the world should look like as architects.
Awesome. Okay, I think we need to finish it. Thank you for being with us. Tom Wiskombe is one of the greatest architects in the world, I guess.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
LA, Los Angeles, California, and then it's been an honor to have you in my channel.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is great.
Yeah, we will look forward to have more projects from your company, I guess.
I can't wait. I'd love to come over to Korea and do some work.
Yeah, anytime, let us know. So thank you for watching us, and please subscribe us if you like it. Please hit the like button, and we will see you later. This is Wonjali from Architecture Recipe. Thank you.